Good morning, everyone. I'm Gabriel Estrada, principal of the Dalus Capital investment team, and I'll be one of your guides today. So I really hope you're really pumped to start our first session. Our next session is going to be our Fireside chat of Aparna Shrivastava, who is the acting climate chief officer of the DFC, with Diego Serebrisky. So Aparna is currently, like I said, the acting chief climate officer at the DFC, with a decade of experience in climate adaptation and international development. She previously led climate finance at Mercy Corps, represented the organization at COP24 and COP25, and served as the strategic director of our renewable energy investment group called FEDL. Shrivastava has worked on sustainable development projects across Africa, Central America, and Asia, and co-founded Lens Shift, a platform addressing systemic injustice. She holds degrees from Oregon State University and Oxford University, and is recognized by the World Economic Forum as a global shaper. We would like to welcome Aparna and Diego. So with that, welcome Aparna and Diego.
Welcome, Aparna. Really, thank you for joining us at this summit. We briefly heard about your impressive credentials, so I don't want to repeat that, but I want to start with asking you, what has been your journey to become the Chief Climate Officer of DFC?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. Really pleased to be here with you all at this event. Just want to express my appreciation for the organizers, for Dalus Capital. I know the U.S. Embassy has been very supportive and is very excited to be supporting here. But yes, to your question, it's been a bit of a journey. I think my career has very much been guided by two personal North Stars, kind of really grounded in impact and equity. And so I started out, my academic background is in mechanical and environmental engineering, and then I continued on to get an MBA. And I think that foundation really gave me the tools and understanding to try to figure out how can we really address the gaps between resource holders and the folks that actually need the resources on the ground. And so what that meant is that I spent just about 10 years working in communities around the world, really working to understand the barriers that exist for communities to be able to access financing, to address kind of policy challenges, a pretty wide range of work, primarily in East Africa and in South Asia, a little bit in Central America as well, but really the work spanned a pretty wide range of sectors in water and sanitation. That was kind of my engineering background, but ultimately you really couldn't work on water without also looking at the nexus with food security, right, with livelihoods, with health impacts, whether that's of waterborne diseases or other things. And so while I started out in the WASH sector, my career then kind of spanned a whole bunch of other areas. And I was really adamant to try to really understand the community level realities of where the challenges are when people are especially trying to access finance. Why isn't that working? You have people that are talking in these conferences about how much they want to be supporting these types of projects. How can we make sure that the capital is actually flowing? And that's kind of then what led me to the finance academic world, but then worked on at Mercy Corps and in the startup ecosystem in London as well. And ultimately, I think I'd say if I had to summarize it, from one opportunity to the next, the thing that really guided where I moved next was where there could be the most impact with my skills. And when the opportunity then arose to actually serve in the Biden-Harris administration, working on climate, it was just an absolute no-brainer. Because ultimately what we really need in the climate finance landscape is systemic shifts of capital to address these issues head on. And so it's really quite difficult to imagine kind of an institution that can catalyze more capital effect than something like the DFC. And I'll get into specifics of that, but it's been a journey of a lot of community level work that then kind of throughout my career, then it's kind of been getting a little bit further away from the community level interactions, but that's ultimately, I think, just where our hearts are, right? If you're in this space. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Okay, no, that's great. I mean, my next question, and you know, when we start planning the conference, you know, it came to my mind is Chief Climate Officer. It's kind of a new role. It's not very common in many organizations. Clearly, DFC is, you know, ahead of the curve on that one. But can you tell us exactly what's the role, what it means, or I mean, and probably it's something that is evolving. But can you tell us, you know, what are those responsibilities and how you focus on what's coming?
Yeah, it's a reasonable question. So look, I think the growth of the Chief Climate Officer role or Chief Sustainability Officer role, it's something that is growing. There's more and more companies that are creating these types of positions, which is really exciting because I think it's an indication of people recognizing some fundamental truths. And those truths really are that the climate crisis currently presents the biggest opportunity for job creation, for economic growth, and truly for a just transition to clean economies globally. I know that might sound a little bit optimistic, but truly, if you look at the data, the amount of jobs that we can create in clean energy manufacturing alone, or in helping aggregate kind of food systems, and kind of addressing all of the different impacts that the climate crisis is already having, there really is kind of opportunity across every part of the sector. And so the fact that so many different companies, whether it is financial institutions or larger corporates, or even kind of smaller companies that are looking to address this opportunity and really kind of take it head on is really great. I can speak to DFC and kind of how the Chief Climate Officer role came about. I think really it was created in 2021 for the purpose of integrating climate across the agency. And that's a pretty nebulous thing to do, right? What does that even mean? Because we already had an Office of Development Policy that was looking at compliance with environmental and social standards. But that didn't quite cover all of the opportunities that are present when you're looking at things from a climate lens. And so I'll just talk you through a few of the kind of ways that we've thought about climate integration across our agency. Probably the most fundamental is around establishing clear ambition and innovation targets for climate. And that's not just net zero. Net zero is an absolutely important part of that, but especially for a financing institution or for any sort of investor, what is your target for climate finance? For us, what we ended up targeting was 33% of all new transactions needed to be climate linked within the next 2 years of operations, starting in 2021. I'm excited to report that we blew that out of the water, and we're very excited about just how much we've grown. But establishing that ambition really kind of allows for a clear roadmap to be established. The second area that I think the climate officer really needs to focus on is to address policy gaps. And this can look different from one entity to the next, but I'll give you an example of carbon markets, right? Or carbon credits, how your institution is going to think about that. Or maybe concerns on supply chains, or just different policies that you are wanting to implement that have kind of a strong climate nexus. That is where kind of the climate officer can really provide distinct, clear leadership. And then, of course, just integrating climate considerations across every single aspect of the organization. For a financing institution like us, that includes things like business development, like lead generation, strategy development, but also from the investment perspective, looking at what are the climate risk considerations that need to be kind of incorporated into the diligence process and monitoring. So you'll hear, I think, in what I'm saying, that there's really kind of a pretty wide range of where the climate officer has to be involved. And I think one of the other really important functions is actual engagements like this, right? To get the message out there that, for example, DFC is wanting to do more in climate. If there are opportunities that you're aware of, please come to us, right? Getting that message out there, establishing strategic partnerships, whether it's with philanthropic partners or private sector, just really trying to figure out how to connect the dots across the ecosystem. So I think, ultimately it's going to look different from one organization to the next, but ultimately I think the role of the Chief Climate Officer is really to look at how can you integrate climate across your organization.
No, that's I think very clear. And now looking at DFC, clearly having your role shows how important is climate in the whole strategy of DFC. But I think it would be great if you can tell us more. I have heard some statistics that there has been a big change and a big growth of climate financing in the recent years. I don't know if you can tell us a little bit more about that, in the case of DFC.
Yeah, so I can underscore just some of the top lines, which I think can really help folks understand. So in 2021, DFC committed roughly $450 million in climate investments globally. It's not a small number, but we wanted more. And that number last year, we grew to 3.7 billion in climate investments alone. And that represents roughly 40% of all of the annual commitments that DFC made. So just in terms of just pure numbers, we're really quite excited about just how much our portfolio has been able to grow. And what we're looking at doing now is really figuring out how can we expand and be more targeted in where that financing is going, right? Growth is good, but what we need to be able to actually demonstrate is in each of the sectors of the economy, whether that's energy or infrastructure or health and agribusiness or financial services, what are the climate opportunities within that, and how can we make sure that our portfolio actually reflects the opportunities and needs of the market? Yeah.
Oh, great. And now, this is a LATAM summit. I understand that Latin America is a priority for DFC, especially on climate. Can you tell us why the organization is in Latin America so important in this area?
Yeah, it is so important, as you said. And I'm excited, actually. I'd like to talk you through a few different things, but ultimately I think the Western Hemisphere is one of our most important markets in terms of regional size. We have over $9 billion invested in the region. This is second only to our work in Africa, and we're really eager to continue building the scale and breadth of our work here. As I mentioned, even in the region, our investments span a pretty wide range in energy, in infrastructure, health, agribusiness, kind of across the spectrum of opportunities. There's various initiatives from within the U.S. government and kind of other partners that DFC is also helping implement, whether that is the America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity, known as APEP. There's also PAC 2030, commitment around climate opportunities in the Caribbean and other areas. And so this region is just of utmost importance given the amount of climate impacts that are already being felt. We're seeing this just in the extreme weather events, whether it's storms or droughts, but also all of the opportunities that are present in just the cusp of economic growth that so many of the economies appear to just be right on the potential of really significant growth, whether it's for electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, you name it. There's so much opportunity, and so we're really excited to help kind of partner with the right folks to help kind of catalyze that shift.
Great. And can you share some of the specific initiatives you're doing in Latin America, or also examples of the type of products that DFC is looking at for the region in climate finance?
Yeah. So think of us as a full suite financial institution. We offer debt and political risk insurance and guarantees. These three, in terms of their ticket sizes, can be as small as $1 million per individual transaction, all the way up to $1 billion. So it's really kind of a pretty wide range of, small business support all the way to large infrastructure. Along with debt and guarantees and insurance, we also recently received the authority to provide equity investments directly into projects, but also indirectly into funds. I can talk you through some of the examples of what that has looked like. Also, along with equity, debt equity, we also recently have been investing in very strategic opportunities for technical assistance. This is a little bit different than some of our agencies. It's not pure grants. There has to be some cost sharing, but ultimately, if there is kind of a strategic opportunity to help kind of a project or an entity become ready for DFC financing, there's a pretty wide range of tools. So pretty much everything except for pure grants, you can probably come to us to work with us. And I can give you some examples of what some of those investments have looked like in the region. So on the mitigation side of things, we're eager to be doing a lot in clean energy supply chains. So I just want to get the numbers right here, so I'll look at my notes. But for example, in Brazil, we committed a $30 million equity investment in a company called TechMet that's specifically looking to develop a critical minerals mining facility that will produce nickel and cobalt specifically for electric vehicle batteries. We'll also be supporting that investment. We're really excited about because there's kind of new technology and processing capacity that TechMet is really looking to bring into the region to help kind of really drive more and more innovation. Another example in Brazil is an investment in BTG Pactual. This is an investment on the nature-based solution side, but specifically also looking at just the mitigation benefits of it, specifically basically looking at investments in fast-growing timber species, but also kind of local native ecosystems and really looking at how to balance and kind of scale the operations there. Another investment is in Tembici. This was a $15 million investment just recently that is looking at providing capital for the growth of their active users in Brazil, in Colombia, Chile, and Argentina, really to help them grow their user base from roughly 300,000 users of their bicycles to over 1 million over the next few years. And this we were really excited just because there's quite a bit of potential for offsetting of emissions from the use of vehicles. Other examples, one of the other really well-known examples in this space for DFC is what's called debt for nature swaps or debt conversions. We've had a few different investments in this space and actually predominantly have been in the region here, one in Ecuador and Belize. And with these transactions, DFC's political risk insurance is basically, through some pretty sophisticated financial engineering, is able to free up financing for conservation efforts that otherwise would not be able to basically be unlocked. Can talk through some of the specifics on that. In the Galapagos, the $656 million political risk insurance cover was able to basically unlock nearly $200 million over the next 15, 20 years that will go directly to local conservation organizations. So we're really eager to really think about how we can drive more and more innovation to drive capital in mitigation, in sustainable landscapes. On the adaptation side, we're also working in a number of investments that are working with smallholder farmers, also with investments in funds. For example, commitments that we made earlier this year in Regenera Ventures that are doing really interesting, important work in nature-based solutions and regenerative agriculture. So really pleased to be kind of really looking at opportunities across the region, but really across all sectors as well.
Oh, it's exciting to hear all the things that you're doing in climate finance for the region, and I think you're becoming a leader in that sense. Now, one question is, when we look, for example, at impact investing for many years, the criteria for deciding on an investment was different from traditional investments. What's the case on these climate investments? It's a same criteria, or you have a different bar, a lower bar maybe, than other investments?
Yeah, the short answer is no, actually. There has to be kind of a clear business case, a clear financial model, et cetera, that can show that there is kind of a path for DFC's financing. But ultimately, if there is kind of a strategic imperative from the potential development or climate impacts, there are kind of incentive structures that can be put in place. But ultimately, the bottom line answer is no. We are looking for investments in the private sector. We're not looking to crowd out private capital. Conversely, we really are looking to bring in as many private sector investors as possible. And so we want to make sure that our criteria kind of matches what's in the market. Now, if our guarantees or kind of other structuring can help other people come to the table, sure, those are kind of considerations that we make. The one thing that I'll say is that we are looking at rolling out a climate risk assessment tool to help inform kind of what considerations should be kind of incorporated in the diligence process. But more broadly, the answer is, we're looking to ensure that the companies that we're investing in are aligning with kind of other criteria so that we can bring in other investors alongside us. Great.
Well, the focus of most of the people in the conference is regarding climate innovation. Mm-hmm. What's your view on the role of that ecosystem in achieving plans to fight climate change?
Yeah, it's an imperative part of the equation. The innovation ecosystem is why we have things like solar panels. It's why we have electric vehicles right now to begin with. And so I think for anything to become mainstream and facilitate this transition, innovation is very much at the heart of it. That being said, my personal view is that DFC needs to do more to support the ecosystem. It can be difficult for us because there is kind of a minimum threshold of what we can provide. There is kind of often need for grant financing or really kind of much smaller tickets than we can provide. And so we're eager, for example, to support investments into funds or maybe partnering with incubators. I've participated in various incubator, judge panels or things like that to really kind of help companies become ready for what DFC might look for. We also partner closely with, U.S. agencies like USAID or TDA that can provide some of that early stage financing that we may not be able to. And so, the role is really quite critical. And I think personally, I've just been trying to figure out, especially in climate innovation, how can we bring more to the table and get more active?
Okay, but it is a priority.
Absolutely,
for sure.
100%.
So that's good news for most of us. Well, we have and I know this can be a controversial question, but we know that there are going to be elections in the US very soon. How the result of that election can impact these climate initiatives at DFC? Is it something that can change, or this program, strategy, vision is something that is already, let me say, baked in at DFC and nothing is going to change going forward? Well, I don't know how much you can talk about this, but I'm asking the question.
Yeah, no, and it's an important one. I think whatever I say, take with a huge grain of salt because there's so much up in the air. We really don't have a good sense of where things might head in terms of the election. But what I can say is that from a personal perspective, we've really thought to incorporate climate considerations as part of existing programming, right? DFC actually went through a pretty major reorganization over the last year where we're organized by sector, and climate actually is not an individual vertical. We have really pushed for climate to be seen as a cross-cutting priority, and so those investments, whether it's in energy or infrastructure or food security or water security, those are investments that will continue, right? They may not be called climate, for example, right? But I feel pretty optimistic that, I mean, DFC's work in terms of really prioritizing development impact will continue regardless.
And the funding for these initiatives is there.
Yeah, and it's funny you should ask that. We actually have never had dedicated kind of, it's not been a dedicated pot of money for climate. It's been kind of financing across for all of the different products, and we've basically just looked to prioritize and ensure that climate will kind of be front and center. So there wouldn't be kind of an impact on the, I guess the allocations officially, because there haven't been even in the last few years, and we've still been able to grow as much as we have.
Okay. For the founders, climate founders that are here, how they should be thinking about working with DFC? It seems like a large organization. What they should do? What's your recommendation for them if they want to approach and explore working with DFC?
Yeah, and I guess this is feedback for, coming to DFC, but I think also just looking to access the climate space more broadly, if it's something that you're new to. Entrepreneurs really are the backbone of what we need to do globally in terms of this transition and this crisis, addressing it head on. We can't address it without you. It's really difficult to run these types of businesses and to push all of this forward. So I just want to underscore that without you guys, it can't move forward. And there's also more and more recognition, as I said at the top, around just the growth of chief climate officers and just more and more interest in climate. But the fact that there is so much more interest in this space, that means that there's also a lot of greenwashing. And I just very much want to underscore that on the financing side, on the investor side, it's really, really easy to see when people are just looking to check that box and just reframing their pitch decks to just say the next sexy, shiny priority that investors might be looking for. And so my advice, and this isn't just for DFC, I can explain, there's folks at the embassy here that you can turn to. We actually have an investment advisor that will be based in Mexico City moving forward that you can be in touch with. Come find us after this. I can give you my card and we can go from there. But in the broader sense of whether you're approaching us or other people, what's really clear is that you need to have a very crisp, articulate understanding of your impact thesis, of your investment thesis, of your model. What is the climate impact? What is the climate problem you're trying to solve? Is it mitigation? If you're on the mitigation side, what is the trajectory? What are the calculations around emissions estimates? Similarly, on the adaptation side, how are you actually addressing climate vulnerabilities? It's not just saying that you're climate aligned to be climate aligned. Yes, there are climate opportunities in every single sector, and there are ways to very smartly frame your work and your priorities in this way. But the greenwashing, we can sniff that out pretty quick, honestly, especially if people are maybe first-time fund managers or just for the first time doing something in the climate space. That shouldn't deter you from doing it. Absolutely not. You have the expertise in the market. You have the expertise of how to run things in a location, but really do the work on what the climate, what the climate impacts are, and what specific opportunities you're looking to tackle.
No, great. Well, I think that we have a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. So, any questions for Aparna? Don't be shy, please.
How do you make sure that there's no greenwashing whenever you are creating those features now?
That's okay, I heard you.
Yeah, I think it's worse now. How do you make sure there's no greenwashing when you deploy capital to financial institutions, projects, or any other type of organization?
Yeah, so for individual projects, it's a little bit easier, right? If it's a project that's specifically looking at solar home systems or electric vehicles, there's a pretty strong kind of connect there. Or similarly in like food security, if you're working on, let's say, ag inputs with smallholder farmers. Where it can become tricky is if we're providing kind of a guarantee or capital to a financing institution, and they are saying that they will on-lend for climate activities. And that's where we've basically developed a very clear annex that goes into our financing agreements that lists out what actually is a climate eligible activity for them to provide loans for, and then also negotiating a minimum amount so that, let's say we're providing $10 million to a local bank to provide green loans, there will be a minimum threshold of how many of those actually need to be fully climate aligned based on the annex that we've legally agreed to together. And so that annex is something that we kind of continually revise. If there's maybe opportunities in a specific region that aren't in another region, we try to make sure that that is kind of as clearly laid out as possible.
And do you have any type of technology to track these deployments from other financial institutions?
Not yet. This is super nascent, and so it's an area of focus for us over the next few years. But what we've tried to at least do is ensure that we are beginning to collect that data on a regular basis. We have some impact dashboards that are coming online that can really help look beyond just the financing of where DFC's portfolio is, but really from an impact perspective. But ultimately, I think, I didn't mention this previously, but we only became DFC with like a very strict development mandate just a few years ago from our predecessor agency. And so the development focus, kind of the climate focus, all of that is pretty new for us. And so it's been, there's been a lot of institutional growth and change to really kind of rise to the needs for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was, okay.
Hi, maybe another controversial question. What's the role of geopolitics in the future of your job?
Strong. Significant. We're a U.S. agency where, DFC was really created to further development objectives, but also foreign policy of the U.S. government. And so, it's very inextricably linked.
Thank you. The criteria that you have is based more, or you have any priority in impact or technology innovation or the scope of the projects or companies? For example, it has to be local or country focused. I would like to understand which one is priority or the first or the more important that you look at when you do this kind of evaluation. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll have an annoying answer to that because the answer is just that it depends on the transaction. I think in some instances where we've really looked to support more catalytic financing, we have been able to invest in first-time founders, for example, that are looking at kind of a sector that DFC hasn't been involved in, but that's more of an exception. I will say, generally speaking, there has to be a clear need in the market that you're looking to fill. There has to be kind of, your auditable financial things that you would expect an investor to ask. I think those things are there. But on the development impact side, we recognize that it changes from one sector to the next. It changes from one region to the next, kind of even the policy priorities that you might be looking to address from a local government perspective. So as long as there is really strong alignment and clear articulation of what you're looking to do, we want to hear about it.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, okay, last question.
Just a little bit on the financial side. If the equity, I'm sure that you expect a return, but if it's going to be an investment, what's the usual timeline and investment rate that you put on it? And I would add on that question, would you do it on a Mexican entity company? It has to be US based? Does it have to be like a third party bank to get that?
Such great questions, and you're reminding me of all the other important things I didn't say. No, so we do not require any sort of US nexus. It can be an international company entirely. The one kind of requirement is that it cannot be, it has to be a private sector company. We can't invest in kind of public sector or state-owned entities, for example. So that's kind of an important distinction. In terms of the interest rates, again, an annoying answer, it depends on the project, but also because we are not looking to crowd out the private sector or distort the market, you should assume roughly kind of market rate interest rates. In terms of the tenor, that is where we can be more kind of lenient. So in our debt for large-scale kind of infrastructure deals, for example, our tenor can be as long as 25 years. And again, we really want to work with kind of individual clients to see what is necessary. I will say, I think with funds, usually it's a shorter tenor, but it's really kind of dependent on the project needs, the kind of the fund model, et cetera.
Well, I know that probably there are other questions, but we need to stick to the agenda. So I invite you to approach Aparna at the break if you have more questions. And just to end, you mentioned that it's very hard to be a founder. Probably it's even harder to be a climate founder. 3-4 words, a short sentence. What's your recommendation for all the founders that are here? How to go forward?
Thanks. And before I share that, I just want to flag, there are other DFC and USG people, so please also find them. Jesse, maybe you can wave, and Phil and Emily. Are there others here as well? Oh, awesome. Wonderful. Great. Yeah, we have several USG folks, so please find all of us after this. No, but look, we can't solve this climate crisis without you. It sounds cheesy, but literally every single one of us needs to do our part. And especially when it comes to founders, you are the ones that can help us actually drive that innovation, drive this transformation at scale. So just please, please, please keep going.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Aparna.